is 90. Okay. About 8 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Yehudah.
This is 9b, Rabbi?
9b. Okay, and the question was, if a guy has an ox or a pit and he hands over responsibility to a cheresh of the katan, basically someone who's crazy, and there's damage done, then he is liable. However, if he hands over fire to it's the same type of person, cheresh of the katan, someone who's crazy, then he's exempt midin bestin. The money can't be the court can't collect. The question is, what's the difference? So the Gemara says that we're talking about where the shur was tied and the pit was covered and the coal that he gave was a coal. The fire was a coal, and typically a shur would typically untie itself. The pit would get uncovered on its own, and the coal would be completely extinguished. Therefore, he's exempt for the coal because the coal's natural pathway is toward being extinguished. Whereas for the pit and for the ox, then he's liable. In other words, if it gets uncovered, which is typically the normal thing that would happen, then he would be liable. I think Mark continues. Rabbi Yehudah shall have a snavi potter, according to Rabbi Yehudah, that says even if you give a kid or someone who's crazy a torch, you're also exempt. The kavasaha chabashar mutter bar megula. So then our scenario could even be referring to a shur that was completely untied, or a pit that was completely uncovered. What's the difference? By the fire, the cheresh himself is the one who's lighting the fire. Right? He's taking the fire and he's lighting something. Therefore, that removes your responsibility from it. Whereas by a ox or a pit, it's your ox that's doing the damage. Maybe because the cheresh, the crazy fellow, is not watching it correctly, but it's not he's not causing the damage. It's your animal, and you're responsible for your animal because you didn't fail to watch it appropriately. Now we're beginning a new Gemara, and we're at Tesam Beis 9b, 5 lines to the bottom of the page.
5 lines to the bottom of the page?
Yeah, 6 lines. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now here we go through all the next stretch of Gemara is all the differences between the different categories of Nezikin. So we have 4 main categories, right? We have Shor, Bar, Maf, and Hever. Shor is more stringent than Bar. It's a more severe category. Why? And Bar, a pit, is more severe than Shor, than an ox. Why is Shor more severe than Bar? Why is the damages of an ox more? Why are you more responsible for those damages than the damages of a pit? Shashar Mashamas a kaifer. An ox that kills somebody pays a penalty payment called kaifer. We'll soon see the details when exactly you pay this payment, but okay, it's payment that a bar does not have. Even if multiple animals repeatedly fall into the pit, there's no payment to kaifer. Even if multiple human beings repeatedly die, there'd be no kaifer. If an animal gores a slave, he pays 30 coins, a fixed amount. If a slave falls into a bar, however, the owner of the pit is exempt from payment. That's because a person should not be falling into a pit. He should look where he's going.
I gotta ask a silly question.
Yes.
When these fixed amounts are provided for, did anybody think of inflation?
Fixed amounts are always different category of payment. It's what we call knas as opposed to mamonos. In other words, whenever you have either a fixed amount or a payment that's greater than the amount damaged, we consider that a penalty. It has nothing to do with the actual damages.
Is there actual damages in addition to that?
So in this scenario, the scenario of an eved, let me think. No, there would not be, and the reason for that is kamlev derab minei.
Is what?
Kamlev derab minei. Basically, if you have two penalties, one is more severe and one is more lenient, you get the more severe penalty. In this case, the penalty is the animal's killed. The aggressor animal is killed.
Oh, so
And therefore, it would not, it would you'd be,
loses that anyway.
and therefore you'd be exempt from normal financial payment because of kamlev derab minei. So for example, under Jewish law, if somebody kills somebody else, there's no civil payments. That's because if you're liable for criminal punishment, you're exempt from civil payments.
Oh,
That's why there would be no. So this is a fixed penalty, and it doesn't represent there are slaves that are worthless and the slaves are extremely valuable. It's still the same fixed 30 points.
become worthless over time.
Yeah, in general, without a Federal Reserve Bank, money tends to be deflationary, not inflationary. It's only inflation is a relatively modern phenomenon with the advent of fiat currency. Okay. Nigmar dina osir b'hanal. If as soon as the court case against the animal to be killed is written, it's signed, so then you cannot benefit from the animal. The animal is when the animal's killed, the carcass just stays there. You can't use the carcass. Okay. Moreover, it's a very important one. A shur goes and does damage. A bar does not do damage. People damage themselves, or animals damage themselves by coming into the bar. Okay. A bar doesn't have any of these features. However, a pit is more severe than an ox. Why? Because as soon as you make it, you have the opportunity to do damage. Whereas a shur typically has to go out and do damage. Just because you have an ox doesn't mean damage is going to happen. Whereas a pit is an inherently dangerous proposition. And moreover, a bar you're chayav in the first time, full payment. Whereas an animal that does damage, you're only chayav after full payment after 3 times. Mashenkin b'shar, shar is in a different category. Okay, next two. Fire is more severe. An ox is more severe than a fire, and a fire is more severe than an ox. Let's explain. An ox is more severe than a fire. Shashar mishalim kaifer. A shur pays this penalty called kaifer. V'chayav b'shloshim shalavid, and the 30 coins for killing a slave. Nigmar dina asar b'hanal. You have the potential possibility that the aggressor animal will be prohibited to derive benefit from. And if you give the animal to be watched by someone who's crazy or underage, it does not remove responsibility from you. Whereas fire, that responsibility is removed from you if you hand it over to a child. And you don't pay kaifer, you don't pay shalashim shalavid, etc. Okay, a fire is more severe than an ox. A fire is muad mitchilasa. That means that as soon as if you light a fire, immediately you pay full damages. Unlike an ox, that if it intentionally does damage, the first 3 times you'll only pay half the payments. Okay, a fire is more severe than a pit, and a pit is more severe than a fire. A bor is more severe than a fire, because the initial creation of the pit allows the possibility of damage. Whereas a fire, right, when used quite productively, isn't inherently that when you light a fire, it's going to cause damage. Moreover, if you hand a pit to a child or someone who's crazy, and it gets uncovered or whatever and does damage, you're chayav. Mashen came eish, with regard to a fire, you don't have that. However, eish is more severe than bor. Eish darka leilach lahazak. A fire goes out and does damage, whereas a pit does not go out and do damage. Pit does not do any damage at all. Right? It's the people that fall in, the people or the animals that fall in damage themselves. Moreover, a fire consumes things that it should consume and things that it shouldn't consume. We'll have to explain what this means. The simple explanation is that a fire is, let's say the normal food for a fire is, let's say, wood, right? But a fire will damage glass, which is not not what you'd expect. Now the law is with regard to a pit. Let's say an animal falls into a pit carrying a bunch of glasses. You're exempt on the glasses and liable for the animal. So we see here that a fire is chayav on kalim, on the vessels, the glass vessels, which are not things that are typically consumed by the fire, unless the fire is in extremely high pressure and temperature. But the pit, with regard to the pit, you're exempt from paying damages for the vessels that fell into the pit. Okay. So the Gemara says, "V'lisni chaymer b'sharmi b'bor." I'm sorry, Mashenkim b'bor. Bor is exempt. Bor, you're exempt from paying for vessels. V'lisni chaymer b'sharmi b'bor sheshor chayav b'yasakalim. Mashenkim b'bor. Why don't we point out that shur is more severe than bor? Because if a shur gets angry and he decides to destroy vessels, he gores a bunch of vessels. You're chayav, the owner of the animal is chayav. However, the owner of a bor is not chayav in that scenario. So why isn't this listed as one of the examples that the damages of an ox are more severe than the damages of a pit? Where it says Hamani Rabbi Yehudah, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. The Mechayev on this Kollel b'bar. Rabbi Yehudah says that with regard to a pit, you're chayev on damages of vessels. 1 second, that can't be Rabbi Yehudah if it's Rabbi Yehudah that you're chayev on Kollel b'bar. Ema seifel. Chaymer be'eshim b'bar she'esh dark lechol what lechol bein davar roila bein davar she'ein roila. We say a fire is more severe than a pit because the fire eats that which is appropriate for it, which is wood, or other flammable materials, and things that are not appropriate for it. The fire will consume things that are. It won't consume things. It will damage things that aren't consumed in a fire. Whereas a bor is not. What's appropriate for a fire to consume? It's some wood. What's not appropriate for a fire to consume? These are vessels, which typically aren't burnt, they're just damaged, or cracked, melted, or charred, at damage of ash and smoke. Mashenkim bar, as opposed to bar, which is exempt from kalim. Second, Rabbi Yehudah, if we're going according to the Rabbi Yehudah says that bar is chayiv on kalim, or you are liable on vessels. So what's the masha in kain? Telling me Aish is liable for vessels, bar is not. But we're going here with the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Yehudah on this kalim bar. Rabbi Yehudah holds you are liable for the damages of vessels. It must be the opinion of the rabbis. And the rabbis left over something. In other words, there are other severities that are not listed in this brisa. Sometimes, in other words, this brisa is pointing to the main differences between categories, but it's not pointing to every single example. The general rule is my shire to high shire. If you want to say that something's left over, you need to point out to the fact that at least two things were left over. Because if only one thing was left out, you don't presume it was left out, you presume it was excluded. Meaning because it's actually incorrect, it's not actually a difference. So if you want to say that, you're right. Shur is chayav and kalim, bar is not. But what else was missing from this brisa? in order to say that something that was left out is not excluded but left out. Or says Shire Tomin. We left out Tomin. What is Tomin? Tomin is an interesting one. I have to go through this and try to give a good explanation for it. Hopefully we'll get to it. We have some time. Tomin is this idea with regard to Aish. A guy lights a fire, right? Mm-hmm. And his friend has a silo full of grain, but he didn't realize that under the silo he kept his mattress full of money. And in addition to the silo of grain burning, which is not a surprise to anybody that a silo of grain would burn, but his mattress full of money also burnt. Now the guy who lit the fire obviously didn't know. Well, not obviously, but it doesn't make a difference. The mattress, the money was in the mattress. It was covered by a silo of grain, so he's exempt from damages. He does not have to pay for this the mattress worth of full of money. He only pays for the silo. This is true of anything. If a guy, if you burn my jacket and there's money in the pocket, you're exempt. You're not have to pay damages. It's called Tomin. Tomin basically means you only pay for things that are readily apparent, things that are hidden. Obviously, if you have a barrel full of oil, okay, that's not considered Tomin because the barrel is the vessel for the oil. But if you have money in your jacket pocket, where the jacket is not necessarily a vessel for the money, jacket's jacket. You could have money in it. You're exempt from damages.
If
so
it brings your wallet, then you'd be liable for the money.
Yes, I think so.
Because, Harry translates it as concealed items.
Yeah, but a wallet doesn't conceal money. A wallet holds money. Mm-hmm. Whereas a jacket would conceal money, right? Or a mattress in a silo or something like that. Okay, so basically, it's another difference. There's a difference between shur and ish, right? Shur is chayav and tomin. Moreover, bur is chayav and tomin, right? If you have a guy is holding his dog in like one of those dog carriers, and the dog is covered and he falls into the pit, and the dog dies, you have to pay for the dog. Okay. You say another possibility. The other Rabbi Yehudah. You can be going back according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Again, what does Rabbi Yehudah say? Rabbi Yehudah says that bur is chayav on kelim. If vessels get damaged in a bar, typically because they're carried by an animal that falls in, so then according to Rabbi Yehudah, you're chayav on those vessels. If the vessels get damaged on their own, well, something's wrong with that, right? Walking vessels that walk into a bar doesn't sound right.
Oh, it's not the beginning of a joke.
Okay.
No punchline.
The other Yehudah. Okay, the other Yehudah going through Yehudah. The dover she'ena royal lavlas to yikalim. When we talk about a fire consuming that which is appropriate and that which is inappropriate, it is not referring to vessels, because the truth of the matter is there's no difference between a fire and a pit with regard to the damages of vessels. Both of them are equally chayav according to Yehudah's opinion. So what's inappropriate for a fire to burn? Basically, where it burns burns a plowed field, so it makes the field less usable, so it damages the ground, so to speak. Again, it's not consuming it, but it damages it. Or it sort of smokes the stones. It makes them less desirable. Okay, 1 second. Right. Now, with regard to a bur, you don't have such a damage, because in a bur, if in a pit, if it breaks it, it's appropriate damage. A pit damages things. How does it damage it? By shattering it, by breaking it. A fire is unique that it's able to damage things through the regular damage, which is consumption, but also through smoke damage. So therefore, it's sort of an unfair comparison, because a fire has the physique of a fire is different than that of a pit, and therefore a fire has a wider range of damages than a pit does. Right? If a rock falls into a pit, precious rock, but nothing happens to it, it's not damaged. Okay, so therefore, Aish has sort of a wider range of potential damages than a pit. Rashi asks a question. we have an example of the severity of shor or over bar, an axe over a pit. Shashar chayev by shor psuli hamikdoshim. Masha ein came bar. Okay, so this we'll get to shortly. Yeah, should get there today. This is a very big discussion, and it comes up many different times in Bava Kamma, and then in the other Bavas as well, which is that the general rule is if a animal is damaged, whether it's damaged by a shor, whether it's damaged by a bar or any other method, the owner of the damaged animal is responsible for dealing with the carcass. Say bailam etaplim benevela. The owner is it's his responsibility to deal with the carcass. He has to sell it. And generally speaking, a Jew is not supposed to be opening up a business deliberately specifically selling non-kosher items. But in this scenario, he's not opening a business. He just has his animal died. What's he supposed to do? He's certainly allowed to sell it. Okay, now that's the general principle. The carcass of the animal is the responsibility of the one who previously owned it. And we'll get to it at length. That can make some significant differences. For example, you think of an ox, right? That gores another ox. What is an ox worth today? $1,500. $1,000 to $1,500. You can go to Eugene or Bend. They both have livestock auction houses. You can go buy them. It's about $1.50 to $1.50 for a live weight per pound. Now, if your ox gores another ox, first time goring is only half payment, $750. Well, is the carcass of the animal worth more or less than $500 to $750? Probably worth more than that. So it means you'd end up paying zero. You end up walking away scot-free. It's only when the animal was sort of emaciated and the carcass isn't worth that much that you'd have to pay.
So if the animal was very healthy,
so if an animal falls into a pit and it walks away healthy, then that's fine. Obviously, there's no damages then. And if the animal died, well, the pit, the animal, they would have to pay full damages. So obviously, a live animal that's ready to be slaughtered is probably worth a little bit more than. Yes, it depends. It would have to be put down or not. It would have to be put down. It's effectively the same thing. And I think if you put down the animal, you can't even consume the meat because it's full of poison. I guess you'd have to kill it with a bullet or something. But he's a bolt gun usually, whatever it is. Anyway. Okay. Now, there's another interesting point here, which is that you have an animal with sharp psuli hamikdoshim. So this animal was previously a sacrifice. Then it got a minor blemish, such that the blemish invalidates it from being a sacrifice, but does not make it non-kosher. So if it broke a leg, broken leg could be an example of this. There's a minor fracture, the animal will still be kosher. It could be even less than that, something like a torn eyelid or something, which is not, the animal is kosher to eat, but not kosher as a sacrifice. So then what do? You redeem the animal. You buy it and you use the money to buy a new sacrifice. And now the animal is called chulin. It's not a sacrificial animal. You can use it for whatever you want. You can plow your field with it, you can play with it, whatever you want. However, when the animal dies, the carcass is not fit for consumption. You can't eat the carcass. So we have a very interesting feature with regard to a bar, with regard to a pit. If this type of animal falls into a pit, the owner of the pit is exempt, period, from payment. Why? Because the Torah says the owner will deal with the carcass and the owner of the pit will pay. Because over here the owner is not going to deal with the carcass, the owner of the pit doesn't have to pay for the damages. Very unique, specifically to bar, to a pit. Okay, and this is not true with regard to shor. If an ox gores this ox, you have to pay. Not only that, you'll end up paying more because the carcass is useless. Okay, so this is the question. A shor that gores another animal that's psuli hamikdoshim, formerly a sacrificial animal, you're chayav. Mashenke bar, where you'd be exempt. If you say that this price is the rabbi's, so according to the rabbis, there are a bunch of things that are left out. In addition to leaving out the law of sharp psuli hamikdoshim, we also have a difference between a shor and a bar, where shor is chayav for kelim and a bar is not. And we have another example of One second. And we also have the example of Tamin, where Aish is Chayav and Tamin, and where Aish is Potter from Tamin, but Bar and Shor Chayav and Tamin. Eliyam Rabbi Yehudah, if you say it's Rabbi Yehudah, my Shire the High Shire, what else is left over? So Gemara says Shire Dosh Beniri. Another difference between Shor and Bar is Dosh Beniri. What does that mean? Dosh Beniri is where the animal stomps on. Sorry, there's a difference in Shor and Bar, between Shor and a pit, an ox and a pit. An ox there's a plowed field, neatly plowed field, it's ready to be sowed, and a Shor goes along and tramples across the whole field, and sort of messes up the plowed field. So the guy's chayav. Now, can you imagine that happening with a bar? Obviously not, right? Because the bar doesn't travel, can't do that. So that's another quote unquote severity that Shor has over bar, because a Shor's severity is to destroy the field, whereas a bar can't actually destroy land. It's not possible.
Difference between passive and active. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly.
Of course, a sinkhole and it keeps taking more.
So that 1 second. That wouldn't be. It wouldn't be that's the structure of the ground. That wouldn't be It wouldn't be a cause of your actions.
Or without the pit, it might not have happened.
It's a good question. I would say that over there you're chayav on the kriya, not on the bar, not on the bar. It's a big difference. It's actually part of Adam. It's the guy who dug the pit that's problematic, not the pit itself. It's not the damage of the pit. The damage of digging the pit.
What you're saying is pits don't kill people. People kill people.
Who would have ever believed that? hard to imagine such a thing, but yeah, I guess so. Isn't it bullets that do? Isn't it bullets, not people?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, okay. So the Gemara says, like you pointed out, Ian, it's not fair to consider this and something that's missing. Why? Because we note another difference. One of the distinctions between bar and shar was that a shar goes out and does damage, which effectively means that it's capable of damaging property, whereas a bar is a passive damager. And therefore, obviously, it cannot go out and do damage, can't damage property either. So it's included under that rubric, and therefore it's not something extra. Gemara's final conclusion is that this Bryce is according to the rabbi's opinion, and indeed, according to the rabbis, there are a few things that are missing. Okay. Now we get into another interesting discussion. We saw this in the Mishnah. It wasn't exactly very clear. If I've prepared part of the damages, I'm liable for all of the damages as if I prepared it all. What exactly does that mean? So if I prepare part of the damage, I'm chayav for the whole thing. Okay, so how is that possible? Chayav for bor tisha. Okay, so here we have an example using a pit. A guy digs a bor for nine cubits deep. And another guy comes and finishes digging it to 10 tefachim. We'll discuss the specifics much more later. But just again, basics which we've seen a few daf ago is that a bor that's 9 deep could do damage, it can't kill, and a bor that's 10 deep could kill. Yeah, obviously there's always going to be borderline stories, but there also has to be a border to make a borderline. So
is this
is the line.
Is this 9-10 distinction an example? Or is that
So this is an example of a fixed. That's
a fixed amount? So 9 bavakamma is fine, 10 is not.
So 9 will damage but not kill. 10 will kill. Now again, this is obviously a much more nuanced question than that, right? Clearly there are going to be animals that die at 9 and there are animals going to survive in 10. But there has sometimes in law, sometimes the courts have to draw an arbitrary line. Even though obviously sometimes, for example, you can't stand in somebody's personal space. It's defined as 4 feet, I believe, Supreme Court ruling, in terms of protesting. If you want to protest, you can't protest. You have to stand outside of somebody's 4 feet. You can't just walk right up to them. And who determined the 4? This is 4 feet from the entrance of a building. I think it's to stand 4 feet away from an entrance. Obviously, some people are going to be more obnoxious more than 4 feet away, and some people less obnoxious less than 4 feet away.
Really, people are obnoxious?
But obviously this is something where you sort of have to draw a line, and this is the line that's drawn. Yeah, there will always be exceptions, but basically this is a line, and therefore less than 10, you're only liable on damages. More than 10, you're liable for death as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's analogous to the 4 feet rule.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so basically this is an example of something that happened 4 and 10. I'm sorry, 9 and 10, where if you dug the last one, you're liable for the whole thing. Or the like for Rebbe, and not like the opinion of Rebbe. The Tanya we learned. Somebody digs a bur that's 9 tefachim deep, or one guy digs the last tefach. Achron chayev, the last guy is chayev, not the first guy. Rabbi Yomer, achron lamisa, achashneim l'nezaken. The last guy is liable for any death that occurs, but both of them are equally liable for any damages. Okay, in other words, in our mission is saying other than that, yeah. So in other words, the opinion that disagrees with Rebbe is very simple. If you damage less, if you deepen a pit and move it from 9 to 10, then even though you only prepare part of the damages, you're chayav on the whole thing. I'm sorry, Papa says our mission could be referring to death, and then it could be going according to all opinions. According to Rebbe also, the last guy is liable completely for death. And therefore, it could be according to all opinions. Ikadamri, a slightly different variation of the same Gemara, is as follows. Lema de like Rebbe. Let's say that our mission is not like Rebbe. Obviously, which is odd because Rebbe is the author of the Mishnah, the one who wrote it at least. Amar Papa, it's not as surprising because Rebbe usually quotes from Meir as the de facto author of the Mishnah. So it wouldn't be so surprising for that to be the case. But Amar Papa Lamisa de Rakol, our mission could be referring to death according to all opinions. Masket Rav Zera has a question. For Suleka, are there no other examples? There's another example. He gave his ox to 5 people. And one guy was negligent. His again does damage. Chayev, he's liable. Samar says, "Hey, Kidami, what exactly is going on here?" This is animal, such a wild animal, or it's so mad. It takes 6 people to hold the animal down. So, and this guy abdicated his responsibility. So then, of course, he's liable because without him, it's his fault. The animal sort of escaped and caused damage. Okay, so they didn't really need him. 1 second. Then, if he left, what did he do? It was a nice, calm, tame animal that was being watched by 6 people. I didn't need him, so then what was wrong with him leaving? So this is not a good example. Masket has another alternative. A guy who literally adds wood to a fire. Hey, Chidamri, what's the story? So this guy, he put a bunch of twigs and he drew a line from the fire to the building with twigs. What do you think happened? Building caught on fire. Probably exactly what he intended. If not for his twigs connecting the campfire to the building, so the fire would have never got to the building. So Pshita, obviously, he's exclusively liable. No, well, his twigs actually didn't make much of a difference because the fire was already so big, it would have spread to the building anyway. Well, if that's the case, Mike Ovid, what did he do? It would have gotten there anyway. Okay, so that's not a good example of somebody preparing partial damage being chayav for the whole thing.
Especially, let's say it was a matter of twigs were already there, thing would have burned the building down anyway. Did he have a responsibility to clear it away so that wouldn't happen?
No.
And become like liable on negligence grounds, even if
yes, obviously, if he did have such responsibility, then he would be liable for negligence. But
right,
that would have to be a very specific scenario. A bystander wouldn't have that responsibility. If he was involved in some way, that would be a different story.
Right. Somebody's just watching.
Okay, Maskell Rapapa. Rapapa has the next question. We have the following price. So, Heisha Yoshvu al Safsal Achad. You have 5 people that were on a chair, a bench. The Shavru, and they didn't break it. And one guy came along and sat on the bench and he broke it. The last guy is Chayev. Omer Papa says, what's an example of this? Going Papa Barabo. Papa Barabba was, let's say, very, very large. Not only was Papa Barabba large, but all 5 people on the bench were very large. So you have a standard park bench, it has 600-pound capacity, whatever, 800-pound capacity, but then 4 very large people sat down on the bench. So they exceeded five very large people. So they well over exceeded the capacity of the bench, the normal capacity. But the bench wasn't going to break. And then another very heavy fellow came and sat down on the bench, and the bench broke. Without this last person, the 6th guy sitting on the bench, the point I'm trying to bring out here is that if the bench was rated for 2,000 pounds and 5 people who have a combined weight of 2,000 pounds sit down on the bench and it breaks, then none of them are chayav. They're all exempt. The bench was rated for 2,000 pounds. It's only right. It's only where that already the first 5 people did something wrong. They already over exceeded the capacity of the bench. They should have known that an average public bench is not going to hold these 5 people. They're too heavy. And now a 6th guy comes along and he actually is the one who breaks it. So none of these people could claim, "Oh, we didn't realize." Well, you should have realized it wasn't going to hold you. Okay, so it would have broken anyway. Mike of it. So what did he do? So a second. So if the bench would have broken anyway by these 5 people have already exceeded the capacity. It's already about to break. So then what did the 6th guy do? Okay, so a second. So the Gemara says, okay, so forget about the question. There's 2 points here. First, the first question here is does this brisa counter our Mishnah? The Mishnah, is this another example of our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says you prepare half the damages, part of the damages, you're liable for the whole thing. Now, this might or might not be an example of that. But there's another problem. How do we understand the brisa? What's the brisa coming to tell us? So let's say, for example, this is not a good example of somebody preparing part of the damage and being liable on the whole thing. Okay, but how do we understand the brisa? Either the brisa is obvious or it's wrong. You hear the question? If the 5 overweight people would not have broken the bench and 6th guy breaks it, then the 6th guy is liable. Like, well, that's pretty obvious. And if the 5 guys would not have broken the bench, would have broken the bench anyway, then they're liable anyway. The 6th guy didn't do anything. So how do we understand the brisa? Without the 6th guy, the bench would have broken b'trei in 2 hours. And now it broke in 1 hour. The Amrilei, they tell him, if not for the fact that you sat down on the bench, we would have stayed on the bench for an hour and a half, and then we would have gotten up. Because you were there, because you were there, it broke. So let the last guy say to them, if not for me sitting, if not for you guys being on the bench also, it wouldn't have broken just with me. So we should have all gotten up. So Gemara says, it broke the moment the guy sat down on it. It broke the moment the 6th guy sat down on the bench. Pshita, obviously he's chayav. Okay. I'm sorry, I misspoke here. I'm sorry. What actually happened here was that he didn't actually sit down on the bench. The bench was a 5-person bench. What he did was he leaned on top of all the people. So they couldn't have gotten up. As the guy sort of laid down on top of them, or he laid down on a few of them, whatever it is, or held them down and put his body weight on it. So he broke the bench immediately, and he held them down, so they couldn't get up. So Gemara says, "Shita." I can't say I've never seen something like somebody engaging this type of.
Nothing since these were fully developed adults.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen kids certainly behave this way. I would think that in other words, over here, it's not his actual strength. He's actually forcing them down to break the bench. Therefore, it shouldn't be considered as if he broke it. Since his body would have broken the bench by actually sitting on it, if he pushes down on the bench and holds down these 5 people, then that also is sufficient to be liable for the damages to the bench. Second, let's finish up. Is there no other example? We have another example. 10 people hit him. With 10 sticks. Either one after another or all at once, and they kill him. Kulam Ptur, and they're all exempt. Rabbi Yehudah says, if they hit him one at a time, the last guy is liable because he killed him. So this is a good example. The last guy prepares only a small amount of the death, according to Rabbi Yehudah, and yet he's still liable. Gemara says, "B'ktol like kamari." Our Mishnah is not referring to death. The Bayasema and other possibilities, but plukta like kamari. We're not talking about an individual opinion. Gemara says, "V'lahi." We're not talking about it. We're not talking about debates. V'alkmina the like Rebbe. The first way to learn the Mishnah was not like Rebbe. In other words, the debate between the 9 tefach bar and the 10 tefach bar does not go according to Rebbe. So we see that the Mishnah is referring to a debate. So Gemara says, in a second, it's a big difference. We're not going with Rabbi, we're going with the rabbi's opinion, which is the majority opinion. That makes sense for the Mishnah. But to go like Rabbi Yehudah and Beseira, the minority opinion, in place of the rabbis, we're not going to go with that opinion. That's another reason why there was only one example of preparing half the damages of our Mishnah. Okay.